afternoon. Well done for making it to the end of the day. We'll try and keep it as entertaining as possible. So thank you very much, Stuart, for the opportunity to chair the panel. And also, thank you for putting on a great day. We've seen some fantastic presentations, some great insight from some really good speakers. So I'd like to start by inviting some of those speakers back onto the stage, if I may. So that's Aidan from HomeServe, Jane from BGL, Matt from 3, Dan from Opus, Ian from Avaya, and Alex from Edo. Hopefully that's the right names and the right companies. Take somebody's knee, thank you very much. Give a wave, thank you. Don't bite. Okay, so I'm going to try and pick up some questions directly from some of the things that you guys said on the stage, hopefully to get a little bit of debate going. We've heard a lot about contact channels, obviously, AI and digital, and of course the only digital that is good is the digital that works well. There are a lot of experiences out there that don't work so well and leave a kind of a bad taste in the mouth. But what is it that your customers are asking for? Yeah, so we're an industry that typically design a lot of good things and then try and work out how to use them. Sometimes maybe push them at customers. Jane, can I start with you in terms of what are your customers asking for in terms of contact methods? And are you reacting proactively or reactively to those requests?
So the insurance industry is quite a traditional industry, and our business model has typically been based around inbound calls. In recent years, everybody's getting digital, everybody's got a smartphone, everybody wants instant access and instant responses. So we've responded to that probably slightly later than we should have done by putting online services and online capabilities. But with those online services and online capabilities, customers want to be managed in channel, and they want to be managed instantly. So that's where our design thinking has been based around both web chat, virtual assistant, and more importantly, removing the need to call in the first place. So that's where we are.
Okay. Anybody else got any thoughts on that? 3, what are your customers asking for?
It's pretty much the same, really. I think what people want is their questions answered at whatever time of the day they want to ask the question, and they want to know that they're going to be listened to. If things go wrong, they want to know that they're going to get a resolution and how long that's going to take. If things go well, they just want to, basically, they want to contact us any time that suits them. They don't want to do it within our business hours. They don't want to do it, at 9 o'clock in the morning. They want to do it at 10 o'clock at night. And so our challenge is, how do we support them to do that? And what technologies do we use to make that process a lot easier?
Okay. We can't go to a conference, and I suspect none of us have ever been to a conference in the last 10 years where we haven't talked about integrated channels and integrated offering, yeah? We've just finished judging for the European Contact Centre Awards. Stuart and I did quite a lot of it together. We saw 140 different presentations, and I think maybe 6 or 7 had something close to an integrated, seamless contact for their customers. Does it matter to customers? Are we still chasing the integrated experience, the integrated channel? Do customers give 2 hoots about it? Dan?
I'll lead in. So the answer is yes. They may not say it explicitly, but the expectation is that we've gone from sort of shopping, making multiple calls so you talk to the right agent or you talk to an agent that gives you the answer you want, to sort of the expectation that I would like a consistent answer regardless of my point of ingress, time of day, and that sort of thing. And that the idea of incorporating, call it artificial intelligence, call it what you will, or an intelligent assistant into the flow is to have that sense of consistency as well as personalization. Some rapid understanding of what you're looking for, anticipation, translates into speed, translates into consistency, and it may not, like I said, may not be outright asked for by the customer, but that's what equates to delight and, a feeling like they accomplished what they wanted.
And what is it that's getting in the way? If we're still chasing that, what is it? Why are we struggling as an industry to get there?
So, and I'll come in as a third-party observer,
Okay.
but then I want to pass it over to the practitioners. I think one of the things that might have come out of the discussions today is it ain't the technology, and that, as a matter of fact, the technology might be out ahead of enterprises' ability to absorb it and incorporate it into existing workflows and processes. Now, having said that, it does get down to preparing organizations to be more responsive to their customers, and so there's a people side to it, which starts with. And this will sound like a digression, but it starts with not talking about this is artificial intelligence coming in to replace folks or automate stuff. It comes with a framing around applying big data and analytics and all the stuff we talked about to enhance customer experience, yes, but also employee experience. And it's all of those things.
Direct connection. If you make the employee experience worse or not better, that's not going to pass on to the customer experience.
Yeah, could I add to that? I totally agree. I think if anything, you need to include humans within organisations more. You cannot expect people to respond to what technology is throwing at them without context. So if people work better together across departments, then they're just going to have more investment emotionally in the context by which what the customer wants to achieve. So it's very much assisted to drive cultural change. So yes, I think that's how I would agree with that.
I agree with that, because I think the idea of saying, we have this omni-channel experience and we segment everything by channels and about how we can create conversions across those channels. I think what we're actually ignoring is the fact that our customers don't care about the channels. What the customers care about is, can they get the information, the products and services they need, however they want to get hold of it. The fact that we as businesses keep focusing on how do we optimize this channel or that channel, I think actually diverts from the problem. So the great thing about this being an art of CX is it's the human problem. Actually, how do we as a business interact with real people? How do we... So the question that always springs to my mind is, I can move from channel, I've abandoned my basket on the web, and we can track that, we know. I've got someone's SMS number, so I can send them a message when it's appropriate to me as a business, not necessarily to them, and say, hey dude, why don't you buy that thing that you said you were going to buy 2 days ago? Without thinking, hang on a second, does that person want that message? Would you want that message? If you're walking down the street or you're at dinner with your friends or what have you, would you want a message saying, hey, that shopping cart online that you abandoned yesterday is still waiting for you. Press the button here and you can buy it. You don't want that. So, and that's where we need to start bringing the people back into, and the UX, the CX, whatever you want to call it, we need to start bringing that back into the equation, actually make more humane businesses.
Which doesn't sound so hard to do, does it?
Oh, it's really difficult.
But easy is the new difficult.
Well, it isn't all that hard to do if you start with that mindset. If you start off not thinking about that technology, how do I make that work? But how does that fit in with what I want to achieve? Who am I? What do I want to achieve? If you fit it into this, then you've got more of a chance to make it right for you. Because we shouldn't forget that we as customers, in my mind, we can be forgiving. Remember my example that I gave earlier on? I was forgiving at the end because I got to the solution. I got to what I needed. It was a struggle. I will remember that in the CSAT, but I got to it. We can forgive. What we can't forgive is when we keep making the same mistakes again and again and again. And there's some simple things we can do, and the technology is there.
I agree, but I also think with new technologies, when you're introducing something new to a customer and you get it wrong, it takes a long time for people to go back and test that. Web chat took a long time to launch because people launched it too quickly and weren't ready for it. So you're right. You need to learn fast and fix quick. But that takes me to Aidan. When your presentation on HomeServe was excellent. And I visited 6 years ago, and I'm due to go back in a fortnight, so I'm really looking forward to seeing the difference. I don't know if this is a question for you, but an observation from your presentation. You talked about using a frontline advisor to do the insight analysis. And what you said was, we use the frontline person because they looked at things differently. They looked at things through the eyes of the customer. And of course that means, and I think we'd probably agree, frontline people do get the customer, but that suggests that people in the supporting structures don't. That they're really good technically. They might be great analysts, great technically at designing a user experience, a customer experience, but not through the eyes of a customer. So how do we fix that? Because we've got millions being spent on technology, potentially by people who are designing things not through the eye of a customer. You're obviously doing it.
So I think the reality of it is get closer to your customer. And one of the things that we've been running now for about a year is a program called Closer to the Front Line. And everybody who sits in a support role has to go to every area of the business and listen into calls and understand what goes on the front line. Because when you're removed, and certainly with, I'm not a technical person, so forgive me for this, but if you're in a technical role, you'll be working to what the system capabilities are, rather than what your end user is, which will be your people who are trying to give that information to the customer. If you go and sit with the people who are taking the calls and talking to the customers for a couple of hours, you'll understand the real challenge and maybe try and fix a different problem. But that's not easy to do. We've all got our day jobs and we've all got things to do. There are, technical issues and system capabilities, but there is obviously, as you're saying, there's a misalignment between what your back office people are usually trying to achieve versus what the customer and your frontline facing people are saying to each other. So it's about bridging that gap.
I mean, technology is exciting, it's great, it's interesting. Listening to the customer can, on the face of it, think, oh, well, I don't do that. That's kind of beneath me. But every organisation that does it well, and there are a few companies that do similar activities, get back to the ground floor, spend X amount of time listening into calls. And I'm sure most of you have tried that, but when you do that and you ask the IT people to come in and listen to calls for an hour, you drag them down, and they're still there a day later, still listening to calls because they love it, because they're learning so much. So it's really valuable. That takes me on to another question, which I'm going to point at you again, Jane, because it's around skills. So you talked a little bit in your presentation about the skills required of frontline people and how that's changing. But I'd like you to look at it slightly differently and say, back to that challenge, well, what about the senior people? Because, to be a good contact centre manager, you historically have had to be very energetic, very keen, be prepared to work long hours and be a really good people person. And that's all changed. Yeah, I think that's all changed. That's what I'm seeing with our members. What are your thoughts on it, Jane?
So a couple of things from my perspective, and I have some operational colleagues here who have a closer experience to that. We work in the insurance industry, but actually there's no excuse nowadays for anybody in a leadership position not to be understanding the technology around them. And more importantly, how you leverage that technology. You might not necessarily need to understand how you code, but you need to know what's there, what's the capability, and how you speak with technical people to get the very best out of them. So that's one of the skills I think you'll find kind of middle managers and senior managers need and are developing as we go forward. We have some really productive discussions. I happen to work in business technology, and my colleagues happen to work in operations, but we sit around the table, we talk a common language, we draw diagrams that make sense for everybody, and everybody needs to be understanding how to make that technology work in this day and age.
Any other thoughts from the panel?
I think with that, one of the things, so for those who have run contact centres and work within that environment, it's very fast-paced and it's very much about the here and now. So being able to take that step back, as Jane says, and actually get people involved in what the future looks like and get those people who are going to be leading the guys on the front line involved in that and take them along that journey, rather than developing it all in the background and then dropping it and going, oh, this is what you now need to know. Because actually, they know a lot of information, they will support developing the systems with you, and they will highlight issues that you don't even realise are going to be on the horizon. So I think it's really important to engage that level all the way through the journey, and then by the time you want to land the technology, they're bought into it, they feel part of it, and they know the capabilities of it, and therefore they can make sure you realise the benefit.
I think
Dan.
one of the things that we say an awful lot in 3, in the products that we build and the technologies we use, is the tool's not the goal. And I think half the problem, do you know what? I think software developers and digital teams have been brilliant at telling everybody that they need to speak the language of computers. We need to speak technically about things all the time. And I'm not entirely sure that's true. I come from a background of being a software developer years and years ago, and I always used to think to myself, well, if people could just understand the technology, they could understand the capabilities, and my life would be so much easier. But actually, as we were saying earlier, the issue is a human issue. I think we need to start talking about the outcomes that we're trying to achieve for our customers, what we're trying to achieve for our businesses. We need to stop talking about the tool as an endpoint of achieving that. The outcome is that we have happier staff members, we have happier customers. The tools and the mechanisms by which we enable ourselves to get there. And I think we need to, actually, personally speaking, and it's just my personal view, is I think we need to do much better at not being technical about those things.
Of course.
And I'd like to frame it a little differently. Life is becoming very complex, and the objectives that people want to attain when they are interacting with the companies they want to, they have the objective of technology is to make the complex simple for the customer. And a couple things go on, and I want to pose a little question to the group as well. We talked about the ingestion of huge amounts of data to go into anticipating what somebody's calling about, understanding what they're saying even though we don't speak accurately, and then helping them achieve their goals. And we've also talked about how that means that an automated system can answer, it's in there in the role to either answer the question or say, I don't know how to answer it, and transfer it over to an individual. And that it's learning, so over time, that list of things it can do gets bigger. And that gets into where I'm going here is that there's going to be, there's been an observation over the years that working in a contact center is grueling, redundant, repetitive, and not very satisfying, so there's turnover. And there's a hypothesis that you apply artificial intelligence and all this data and the pattern recognition to do that boring stuff and make the job that a contact center rep is doing much more interesting because they get the more sort of complex and personal stuff. And so that's a hypothesis. I just wanted to ask if that's actually starting to happen. And if not, that's sort of the question of how quickly this will get adopted into...
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? In my head, I think it is, but actually it's probably not there yet. That's what we all aspire for, isn't it? As we touched on, trying to take out the high-frequency, low-value, boring interactions out for the advisors so they can get really clued up and really excited about solving a customer problem. It's a direction of travel. I suspect we're taking some of that out, but I suspect we're not close as we think we might be with it. I don't know.
So I think one of the important things for us, so we're not in a space to be able to do that from a chatbot perspective at the moment. We are working towards that. Your hypothesis is correct in that the more we've multi-skilled our people to do different daily routines, the more they're engaged within their role. So it absolutely stands to reason that the more of that kind of the monotonous activity that goes out of there, the more engaged they will be within their role. So it would stack up.
Okay, just want to draw us back a little to the educational skills piece and ask you, Ian, your thoughts on, if you're not born digital, because most of us weren't born digital, how do you make sure that your digital strategy is the right one? Unless you pull some 13-year-olds onto your board.
Well, yeah, apart from exactly that, the younger generation. It was interesting, listen, Alex, when you started, you actually removed the word digital from digital transformation. And I'd agree with that, but everyone talks about DX at the moment, this digital journey, and it is exactly that, a journey. And it's been reiterated by Aidan, Jane, and Matt on the journey you're on. I think first off, instead of worrying about the digital bit, focus on your customer. What experience you want to give them? How do you and they want to engage? And draw your strategy and your journey based on that. The technology will follow once you know what your strategy is and how you want to engage. And ensure, I know Greg touched on that, obviously, with the likes of Sabio involve the Sabios, the Avayas, and all the others that are involved in that for their advice, their experience. And speak to other similar sized organizations that have gone through this journey. The technology will follow once you know what journey you want to be on. When do you want to start it? How do you want to engage? And the building blocks will be put in place. Make sure it's an open standard so you can integrate. It's not one vendor anymore, it's a multiple vendors. Mm-hmm. And then keep evaluating it, like all the guys have said. Has that worked? Ask your customers for feedback, change your plan accordingly. But it's a journey. You won't get one solution in one box and do it overnight.
And do you think that organisations get machine learning? Do you think they understand?
I think it's by definition. I think everyone will take machine learning in different ways. We're in the AI, there's chatbot, everyone's talking about blockchain coming in at the moment. And I do believe there's an element of automation that will come in. To Jane's point, is everyone there? No, I don't believe that they are. I do believe that the easier basic transactions will become more automated. Machine learning will replace some of that, allowing your agents to be able to work on far more high-profile interactions, transactions, or complaints and issues that I don't believe technology is there. The human element has always got to be there in the background.
Humanity is king.
Can I just come back on a point about digital strategies? I think they more fundamentally and more radically need to be shaken up in the way that they're created. We probably, it's probably true, maybe a bit unfair to say that most organizations still create strategies from a very command and control position. They get a consultant in, they create a strategy, it's probably loaded with guff, and then they roll it out. And I think we need to crowdsource what a digital strategy is so that everyone who's executing it understands and feeds into that process of creating that strategy so that it's meaningful to them and that they can understand how they're going to roll it out and they can iterate it. Because I just think there's an outdated mentality towards how they're created.
And that's a very good point. I think there are two key groups you have to engage, and Aidan, you touched on it. As much as your customer focus, involve your team in that decision. The people who are involved in it day in, day out, make sure it's in line with the board, whether that be the CFO, the CMO, and everything that's happened. Engage your team, because their insight is absolutely critical on the journey you're about to take.
One common term we're hearing more of, and if you've not heard it yet, take it home today, is conversational commerce. So organisations connecting with customers via Facebook or web chat or messaging. Klaus, one for you probably. What's your take on conversational commerce, and should the board be paying attention?
I think so, yes. I do think we should pay attention to it, because essentially if you look at us, if we go into a shop, there is some interaction. Is that just this conversation is just a different term for interaction? I give something, I get something, I give something, I have a conversation about it. A lot of what we do when we achieve a task is driven by how we perceive that task. And time, as Dan talked about earlier, is about time. It's perceived. So if I have a conversational kind of interaction that may feel different, measurable, it may not be the quickest interaction, but the outcome's there. So it's an interaction. I get some information back. By me guiding you through a task, I learn just as much from this as you learn from me. And I think that's where the conversational commerce comes in. I feel more comfortable pressing the go button now. So I do think.
And it's intelligent. It's not just blunt. I'm going to sell you something while you're talking to me, because that's just crude and blunt, and it sends people running.
Yeah, I talked about predictability when I talked about what we're looking for, but it's not in the sense I know that this is a menu tree and it goes there. It is about familiarity, that kind of thing.
Ian, forgive me, but I'm just going to take the opportunity while you're on the stage. You've obviously, Avaya have had an interesting 12 months. They say every book has a challenging chapter. How's your chapter going? And what's the next chapter looking like?
It's either an interesting chapter or the $6 billion question. So I think everyone knows that Avaya's, through a number of years now, I've got a $6 billion debt that we had to serve. And that came through leveraged buyouts. One of the best known one was 2010 when we acquired Nortel. And in essence, we've been paying interest on that debt. But a bit like an interest-only mortgage, we haven't reduced the debt, we've just been serving on interest payments. And there was a time we had to serve that debt. One was, do we sell off parts of Avaya? Other than the networking business, we didn't want to do that. Splitting our CC and our UC portfolio out was not right. Greg touched on some of the latest technology. So really it left us, we went into Chapter 11 in January, that was voluntary, and that's a protection. So all it did is it stopped our interest payments and allowed us to address the debt restructuring, but continue standard operations. Operationally, it's still $3.5 billion at 25% EBITDA. So operationally, it's a very sound business and one that most in our industry, our competitors would be jealous of, but our debt never got served. So where we are now, we've been working with the courts in New York. We've submitted a plan of reorganization, which has been accepted. We went back to the courts in August with what's called a PSA, a planned support agreement. So our creditor groups are all aligned in reducing that debt, and that debt would be returned in equity in Avaya. So we now have a confirmation hearing on November 15th. Our creditor group, a Lean 1 and a Lean 2, but in essence, the people who will be taking an equity share into Avaya, are now voting in favor of this plan officially in the New York courts, where the Avaya Inc. filing has been made. We do not foresee any issues in that. We're still on course for the court hearing November 5th. The plan is that the judge, who has final say, will agree to our plan of reorganization, thus allowing Avaya to exit Chapter 11. Our debt will come down by $3 to $3.5 billion. To circa, we plan to exit with $2.5 billion of debt remaining. To serve that, we're also going to list on the New York Stock Exchange at the same time. So by the end of November, we'll be out of Chapter 11. We'll be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. That allows us to build liquidity into those shareholdings. And over time, that allows us to reduce the debt moving forward and associated. But that we expect will free up just the debt, about $350 million in cash to go back into R&D.
And I was going to ask you that next, if you don't mind. So that's reassuring in terms of safe and back in the black. But I guess as Avaya customers, what people are really interested in is, so where's the future in terms of research and development? Are the funds still available? Is there still the commitment there for development?
Anne-Marie, good question. And throughout our Chapter 11 process, so the rumours started, if you might remember, in 2016 with Wall Street Journal, New York Times. We were spinning off parts of our business. The contact center business was worth $5 billion, etc. And it really was rumours. All the way through 2016, we maintained 16% of our revenue, circa $3.5 billion, all went into R&D. It's one of the highest in the industry compared to our competitors, who are high single digit, low double. We maintained that all the way through 2017, albeit the dollar value is more because we're not spending any R&D in networking. That's obviously transitioned over to Extreme. So every dollar, 16%, continues in R&D. Greg touched on some of the portfolio we launched last year. Breeze and Oceana, which is outside the open API platform for work integration and workflows, all the way down to handsets, vertical applications. So we produced 60 new products in 1 year. And that 16% will increase, and we will continue in R&D specifically around the UC and CC portfolio. That's guaranteed.
Thank you very much for coming back on stage and sharing your thoughts, and put your hands together, and I'll hand you back to Stuart. Thank you.